Welcome back to the Not Yet Adults podcast. This, of course, is a podcast starring Collin Geffrey and myself, Eric Zayas, as we navigate the treacherous road of adulthood.
It's true. All of it.
What are you thinking we should talk about today, Colin?
Well, Eric, we're sort of back. We're into the rhythm of making episodes again, which is a good feeling. And one you and I had talked about around the time we did our Christmas episode, maybe even a little bit before, is sort of going out to movies and going to the theater and the experience that has, and how that has sort of, I don't know if clash is the right word. That sounds a little too confrontational, but how that has changed as the age of streaming has come to be. And you can do everything on your computer, your phone, or your entertainment system of choice. And I just kind of want to talk about which of those we prefer, what the pros and cons are of each, both streaming and going out to the movies. And how they've sort of learned from each other and how they're adapting to each other existing. So I'm just kind of curious what your take on that is. I guess we can start with movies. Is how often do you go out to the theater? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, I used to go out to the movies all the time, especially when MoviePass was a thing. Do you remember MoviePass?
I do. It was just a flash in the pan. It had about a year of really successful.
Because it became magically $5 a month or something crazy like that. Or no, I think it was $10 a month. Sorry, $10 a month, which means each month you can see unlimited movies basically. And $10 for many places is cheaper than one ticket. So if you used it just once a month, you were saving money, and if you use it like twice a month, you were saving a lot of money. So I watched a lot of movies in that time, and then of course, because that business model doesn't make any financial sense, MoviePass company went under, and then they kept doing weird stuff. It seemed like they were throttling their service, or making certain movies not be clickable, and
they'd have all these restrictions, you had to be within 100 meters to claim a ticket, and you couldn't claim a ticket twice for the same movie, I think, or that was a 48-hour cooldown or something. All this stuff that they're trying to get to preserve their business model, and it just doesn't seem sustainable. I think they're still technically in business, aren't they?
I hope I canceled my service successfully, because the app was being really weird around the time when everyone was trying to cancel their service. And for some people, I heard online that some people had their service canceled denied, and so they had to go to their credit card company and say or deny the transactions or whatever, so it would cancel their service that way. But I keep getting emails to them. I hope I successfully cancel my service, because if I'm still paying for it, that's gonna be really annoying.
Because I looked into it, I don't remember when this was, but because I love going to the movies, and especially I think it was when I was in Tacoma at PLU. The problem is by the time I bus out to the movies, get a ticket at the movies, and get a small popcorn and drink, I've spent $30-$40 just on that day. And so it wasn't sustainable. But looking at especially because I didn't really have much work while I was in Tacoma, but especially looking at the prices, I was oh, this is interesting. I like this idea. I think it's worth the value. If you see literally 2 movies a month, it pays for itself. But it got to the point where it was I think you had to pay a year up front. It was prepaid of you have to pay the $80 or $100 or whatever dollars as a lump sum. And then it was basically with the understanding that, hey, we don't know how sustainable this service is. So if you pay that lump sum and then 3 months later we're under, that's it. You don't get that money back.
Not to talk about MoviePass too much, but I mentioned MoviePass because around the time when MoviePass was a thing, I was watching a lot of movies, and I really like the in-theater experience. I typically go to Regal lit theaters because they're just more common around this area. AMC is good, and they have Regal's the place you want to go if you just want to show up to a theater, be what's playing right now, that okay. Or if you don't want to plan a lot and just want to say let's see a movie today, let's go there, and then buy your ticket at the theater at the time, because there's a lot of places nearby around that have pretty decent experience. Not amazing, but a decent experience. AMC, you have to plan ahead, because a lot of the AMCs require or have reserved seating, and you really need to plan okay, on this day we're going to see this movie, and so let's buy a ticket ahead of time so we can pick good seats. Because if you go to the theater, I've done this a couple times, where I go to an AMC theater right 5 minutes before the movie's playing, and say I'd like to buy a ticket, and they're like, okay, we have reserved seating, so pick your seat, and there are only bad seats available. And like, so either I sit in the far back or like really close to the front, which is even worse. And ugh, it's a nightmare. Although one time I did do that, I did that for a Transformers movie, and I feel like it, because those movies are already ridiculous, it made it that much more intense. Like seeing the movie, like really, I was like in front of the. I was at the very front of the theater looking up, watching, I think it was Transformer 5, and it, because that movie's already bonkers, they made it like 10 times more bonkers.
So just throwing kind of a pin in that real quick. A few weeks back, I want to say it was about 3 weeks ago, I was downtown, and there's like two major theaters in Spokane. There's the Regal, which is in the Valley, and my opinion of that is it's a little bit lower end. It's a little bit dirtier. There's usually not as many people there. I don't love the Regal. And there's 12 theaters there, and then there's the AMC downtown, which has, I think, 20 theaters. And I really like the AMC a lot more. It's really cool. It's like the upper 3 or 4 stories of the mall are just the AMC. So it's like it builds up, and then you go up all these escalators, and it's just theaters from like the 3rd or 4th floor up. And so I went the other day because I had like 3 hours to kill downtown, and I was like, you know what? I don't really care. I know it's going to be bad. I'm just going to go see Aquaman by myself because I just have time to kill. And I ended up falling asleep in Aquaman.
That bad?
It wasn't even that bad. I was just really tired. I had that long day. But anyway, so I go in there and I buy a ticket, and the only tickets I can see are like between, it's like these 2 seats in between people all on either side. And I was like, I don't really want that, but I bought the ticket anyway. And then I went and just sat down in any seat because it was like 5 minutes before, and like freaking no one was there. And as the previews start, everyone comes in, and this young couple comes in like, excuse me, you're in our seat. And I knew I wasn't in my seat. So I was like, okay, fine. So I shuffle over to the side, and I'm in another seat. I swear to God, 20 minutes after the movie actually starts, this old, probably 65-year-old lady comes up to my seat and says, excuse me, you're in my seat. And I look up to where I know for a fact my seat is, and there's about 4 kids on either side of my seat. And so it's like 10-year-old, 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 my seat, 10-year-old, 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 10-year-old. And I'm just like, oh my God. And at the same time, it's like dark, and the young couple next to me has already seen me pretend it's my seat once. I mean, I didn't say like, "Are you sure?" It was just like, "Oh, sorry, I was just hanging around." And so it looks like I like stole this movie ticket. Like I came in here and I don't actually have a seat, and everyone just keeps kicking me out of their seat. Yeah, and anyway, so that was my. I don't know about assigned seating, man. I feel like sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
I feel like there's 2 people who love assigned seating, and it's like, yes, I love planning ahead and picking a great seat and knowing where I'm gonna sit, instead of like going to the theater and like maybe I'll get a good seat I like, maybe I won't, I like plan. And there's other people that are like, I just want to go to a theater and sit down. I don't want to have to like plan ahead. So it definitely appeals to some people and doesn't appeal to some, but it's just it's inevitable you're gonna have an awkward situation where you go to your seat and someone's sitting there, and you have to be the guy that's like, hey, I paid for this seat, can you move? And like I think 99% of people will be fine with it. You'll occasionally get the one person that's like a dick about it, and then you gotta like, okay, well now I have to go
Steal someone else's seat from them.
no, I have to go back to the front. I wouldn't do that. I would go back to the front and be like, hey, someone's sitting in my seat and they won't move, and then it's a whole thing. But
And then the SWAT team in riot gear comes out, and they're like, you gotta get out of here, man.
there was one time I went to see I think it was the Hateful Eight at a AMC theater, and I was sitting in my assigned seat, and there was a woman next to me, or there was a guy next to me sitting there, and then an older woman went to sit there and was like, "You're in my seat," and then he was like, "Okay," and then he left like without a problem, and then she sat in that seat. And then for like the first 20 minutes of the movie, she was talking to me about that guy and was like, basically saying like, oh, I hate when people sit in the seat, and like she's talking to me about the guy, and I'm like, I just don't want to talk about it. It's over, let's just move on.
You mentioned the Grand Cinema. What's going on there? What's that all about?
The Grand Cinema, I put in a little list that we used for talking points, because the Grand Cinema is this little theater in Tacoma, the heart of Tacoma, and they it's a smaller theater that plays a lot of like indie movies and movies that don't play in mainstream theaters. And I like them because, well, one, they serve beer, which is nice, and they also have these really nice cookies that are like, if they feel and taste like homemade. They're really good. So they have good concessions. I think they also have like a ice cream from Ice Cream Social, which not a lot of theaters have. But they're just a little small theater full of volunteers, and it's just a nice like quiet homey theater. And they play like, yeah, like I said, indie movies. They'll play like Alfred Hitchcock movies and like oldies that like, like kind of the sort of movies you'd only see at like Fathom events, but like they're a lot closer than any Fathom events. And they're just a nice quiet little theater. And yeah, I also volunteered for them during the summer for a film camp where it was this little, it was this well, it wasn't volunteer, it was a paid position, but it was this mentor position I had where I taught kids about film and stuff. And so the Grand Cinema just has a little special part in my heart. It's like a community theater. It's very focused on community.
Yeah, because I mean, I mentioned there's the Regal in the Valley here, and there's the AMC downtown. There is technically a third theater on the north side of town. I don't even remember what company or affiliation it is. I've only been there once, but I guess there's technically 3 big theaters in Spokane. But whenever I do my Fandango search, I'll see there's a few other theaters popping up, and I assume it's kind of like what you described the Grand Cinema being, of like small little like art house theaters basically. And I'd love to start checking those out because that's totally like a like underground hipster thing that I think I'd get a kick out of, just because that sounds awesome to me. But no, that's cool. So we kind of talked about what theaters we go to just really quickly. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm curious, do you have a strong preference? Are you like a 2D guy, a 3D guy, IMAX, Dolby? Like where do you come down? Do you care about any of that stuff?
I mean, I'd only really go to IMAX showings when there's like a movie that I feel like it would take advantage of the medium, like a Star Wars, or like a big like comic book movie like Infinity War. I saw in IMAX, that was pretty good. Otherwise, IMAX I feel like isn't really my thing. It's a little bit expensive and too much, but I do like going to the AMC Kent Station IMAX theater for those kind of showings. And as far as 2D versus 3D, I always prefer 2D. I feel like 3D's just not my thing, man.
I'm trying to think of like what movie honestly have I been like that was better in 3D, and I think maybe Avatar, and even then it's a toss up because I don't know. I think it's obnoxious. I think it doesn't really add anything to the experience, and I hope it's gone soon because I'm sick and tired of it. Yeah, I'm pretty similar. I definitely prefer 2D over 3D. IMAX, I could take or leave. I think it's, like you said, sort of cool when you have those giant spectacle movies, but you don't need it all the time. I will say I went and saw Last Jedi. Fool me once, thanks Disney for how that went. But I saw it in Dolby with my little brother, which is like the seats literally have speakers built into them. And it's like 2 4K projectors right next to each other, so it's like I think like technically an 8K image or something ridiculous. Like just it's supposed to be like the pinnacle of technical movie going or whatever. And the tickets are like north of I think $20 a ticket, but there's literally like one Dolby theater at the AMC downtown, so they have like 20 different theater rooms, and literally one of them is a Dolby. And we'll go there just once in a blue moon because it's an experience. Like it's really really cool. And the seats are like really nice and everything, but it's also the ticket price reflects that. So Eric, what about like streaming services of watching movies or TV shows or what have you in home as opposed to going out to the theater? Talk to me a little bit about that. What do you use? What do you like? What do you not like? That sort of stuff.
Well, I mean, because it's the 21st century and we're modern day people, I obviously use Netflix. Netflix is such, they're so lucky to be, I mean, like, they're a great service, but like also they're the only service I know of that's has nothing to do with sex, but has, because of the Netflix and chill kind of joke, become sort of like pushed together with this like sexual activity. So people like associate Netflix with sex, and I think that's part of why they're so successful. Just because I guess the meme, but Netflix, I like their, like, they've got a great selection of like movies and TV shows, like a crazy extensive selection. But also they've got a lot of good. Their original stuff is either really good or meh for me. Like they don't have a lot of like stinkers. They have a lot of really good stuff, but like also because they make so many originals, you're bound to get a few like eh.
Well, and I don't have statistics on this, but I know not all of their originals is their originals. Often they'll scoop up something that's already been made or is being made and just kind of slap the Netflix logo on it. Back in the day, when you had like Orange is the New Black and House of Cards, of like these are like Netflix directed, Netflix written, Netflix produced series that you can only get there. Like I feel like that was more of an event. And now like freaking every weekend some original programming of some sort on Netflix is out, and it's like
I was watching this Red Letter Media episode where they talked about the Cloverfield paradox and how they threw a lot of shit at Netflix and were saying it's basically become like the modern day straight to DVD movie, where like if a production house may have a movie that they don't think will do well in the theaters, they'll sell it to Netflix for like really cheap, and then it'll just go on Netflix. And like, so the Cloverfield paradox was an example of a movie that had no advertising. It just was like something that was teased a little bit, and then it's just out on Netflix, and people were like, what? And they thought it was a crazy event. And it makes you think, like, did they put on Netflix because they wanted this big surprising event, or they put on Netflix because they knew that it wasn't as good as the other Cloverfield movies?
well, which is funny because like I'm not really a Cloverfield fan, but I loved 10 Cloverfield Lane. I thought it was phenomenal, and I'm also just in love with Mary Elizabeth Winstead ever since Scott Pilgrim. So I was like, yes, I'm here, I'm in. But yeah, I thought that movie was great, and I never was interested to see Paradox because everything I heard was like what you just said. It was very meh. It was just kind of meandering, and the tie-ins to Cloverfield felt kind of forced.
They were forced. They were like loose and didn't really make sense. And it was kind of, it felt like afterthought. But anyways, so like I do enjoy Netflix. Right now I'm going through Friends. And I'm like on the fourth seasons. It's so good. Like, no, it's just I heard that like Friends was going to be taken off Netflix, but Netflix like paid $100 million to keep it on for one more year. So I was like, well, Jesus, I gotta watch this before it's not on there anymore. But
we should do an episode at some point about like pop culture hot takes that we have of like unpopular opinions, because I have things to say about Friends. I think it's vastly overrated, but that's just me.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that say, like, I mentioned Friends and they're like, well, Friends is whack, and I'm like, what? But yeah, it's I can see why they say that. It's like the quintessential sitcom, for which, and take that with like the praise and the flaws that comes with that. But so Netflix is great, Amazon's great. They have like Amazon originals are like, they weren't doing great, well at first, but now they're like really good ones, like Jack Ryan and like
well, there's Handmaid's Tale, I know, is a big one for a lot of people.
Handmaid's Tale is great. The what's the one that's Man in the High Castle? I have to get into that, but yeah, they're doing really good with originals, and like I like watching like shows like Mr. Robot and like stuff like that. Like it'll be like after the episode comes out, the next day it'll be on Amazon.
Well, and I think it's undeniable that Netflix is miles ahead of anyone else when it comes to original programming, but they're also tremendously in debt because of that. So it'll be interesting to see if Amazon kind of puts more, because I mean, it's not that they're not doing original programming, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what Netflix is doing. And so it'll be interesting to see how much emphasis Amazon puts on that in the future, as opposed to just, collecting all these movies and TV shows that people want to watch and just having them on your service, as opposed to original programming. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
And just before I throw it to you real quick, I just wanted to really quickly mention Xfinity Online or On Demand Online, because it's like, it's really cool to have like an episode you just recorded and you can watch it on the computer. It's a neat thing. It's also very like what's the term like for highly privileged thing, because you have to have like Comcast to have that, and Comcast is expensive as hell. But if you do have Comcast, it's really cool. It's really neat.
Well, and I also feel like as we're getting into more of a digital and streaming content age, more and more people are cutting the cord when it comes to cable.
Yeah, because you don't even need like cable. You can so many things are online now.
Well, and now like Hulu and YouTube and services like that, you can have live TV through that if you pay a monthly fee. So you can literally have your TV through your computer streaming device and have your cable cut. I had one source I wanted to mention, but before I do, there's a term that they taught us about in business school, and I don't remember what it was called, but it's essentially when the name of your product becomes synonymous with the activity of actually using it. And so an example of this would be like Kleenex or Q-tip.
Or like Google.
Right. And so when you say or mention those things, you're not actually talking about the brand Kleenex or the brand Q-tip or the brand Google. You're talking about the activity that that thing does. And so the brand actually becomes just completely synonymous with the activity or the item. And Netflix, I feel like, is darn near close to that. Of like people will say, "Oh, let's find something on Netflix." They don't actually mean let's find something on Netflix. They mean let's pull out our Fire Stick or our Roku or whatever and find something to watch. But Netflix is becoming so synonymous with let's watch something or let's stream something that I honestly think like it's incredible what they've done in the time that they have. But I just want to throw kind of like a dark horse candidate in there that I feel like might resonate with people from your and I's generation, which is YouTube. Like I feel like we're part of the first generation that like instead of coming home from school and turning on the TV, we came home from school and turned on YouTube. And like I can probably count on one hand like the actual TV shows I watch anymore, but YouTube I watch stuff. I mean, I listen to anywhere between 10 and 25 hours of podcasts on YouTube a week. And then I'll watch, shorter videos and stuff as well. But like if I'm doing something and Netflix isn't on, YouTube is. And so it's totally a way that people are, spending time and getting their entertainment these days. And it's made it all the easier because it's, on everything. It's not hard to have access to. But how do you think the theater experience is going to adapt to stay relevant in the coming years? Or maybe it won't. Maybe it totally is just going to die off. What's sort of your feelings on that?
Like saying that something needs to adapt or it's going to die, I always point to like the newspaper where it's like, well, the newspaper hasn't really adapted and it's still around. I don't know how long it's going to be around, but people keep saying, oh, it's going to go the way of the newspaper, and like the newspaper's still around. So I hope theaters adapt. There's like this theater that I think is a really good example of a way it could adapt, and that's the Alamos Drafthouse. Which, for those who don't know about the Alamos Drafthouse, they're a theater that started in Austin, Texas, and they have a lot of locations in Austin, but also they have a few in New York. They have like one in, I think, downtown Los Angeles, and a few different places scattered around the world. Not a whole lot of locations, but if you live near one, you're really lucky. They're a theater where they're like, they have like, it's almost like a restaurant mixed with a theater. They have really good options for food, and like they serve it to your seats, so you don't have to get up. So it's not just this like crappy concession stand options. They have like genuinely good food.
I feel genuinely sorry when someone goes to a Regal and they buy like a hot dog or something like that there. I'm like, what is wrong with you? That's not
It's a joke. Their food, it's a joke. And it's also really expensive. And like if you're going to pay that much for food, it should be good quality food, not that crap. And Alamos Drafthouse has good food, really good service. They have like really good beers if you're a beer drinker. Draft House is part of the name, and so they have draft beers. But also, they make a special. They put special work towards the theater going experience. So like anyone who's on their phone or talks during the movie will get kicked out. Like generally they will kick people out for that stuff. And they, for most of their showings, they only allow people who are 18 and up to go. So like you can't bring your kid to the movie theater, which I mean kind of sucks for a lot of people, but it was also really good for.
Sign me up, man. I'm there. I'm so sick of kids at the movie.
Me too. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a person that has a kid, but like if you're going to a movie, unless it's a special screening for like kids movies, you shouldn't bring a baby. You should get like a sitter. Most theaters will say they prohibit that kind of stuff, but they won't do anything about it. Alamos Drafthouse seems like a rare example of a theater that will actually do something about it. But so yeah, they put a lot of work into like creating a generally good theater going experience. And I feel like a lot of theaters like Regal and AMC and the franchise theaters should, kind of follow suit. Or else they're not going to be around forever.
No, I totally agree. And it's a shame, like full transparency, I don't think you or I have ever been to an Alamo Drafthouse, but I hear about them all the time and I've heard nothing but good things. And so I hope that, somewhere up here in the PNW, as it were, we'll get an Alamo Drafthouse at some point because I think it'd be a great experience. But
what about you, Colin? How do you think the theater going experience will evolve?
The one thing that comes to mind is sort of this trend we're seeing, which is day and date digital. Of a movie comes out in the theaters and it's on iTunes or Amazon or whatever at the exact same time. And I think that's really bold, and I like that a lot because so often I see a trailer, uh, almost always it's for like kind of like an indie drama of some sort, something that's like probably not getting a whole lot of press, but it has like a couple good actors or actresses in it, and it looks like it's probably going to be moving or compelling in some way. And my thought is almost always, I'm not going to go out to the theater and pay for that, but it'll be a great watch on Netflix 6 months from now or a year from now or whatever. And day and date digital is interesting to me because you see all these movies that you'd like to see, but that you're not willing to go out to see. And you're like, oh, I'll pay $3 to rent it or whatever. And that to me is totally worth it because you're having your movie night at home, especially if you have a nicer TV or kind of an in-home entertainment system of some sort. It's worth it to me. And there's so many movies that don't do this or that wait too long to do this. And, by the time they come to digital, it's 6 months or a year later, and I'm not thinking about that movie anymore because there's a million other things coming out. And so, honest to God, if I know you'd see probably a hit on it initially, but if I think in the long term, if every movie that came out in theaters came out digitally at the exact same time, and you could just choose which way you wanted to see it, I think you'd actually see an increase in revenue long term. Because there's so many people, especially millennials, that want to do something but don't want to go out. They don't want to leave their house. And so I think if you just put it on iTunes the day it comes out in theaters or Amazon or whatever you use, I honestly think you would see an increase in revenue as opposed to what we have now, which is it's in theaters and then 6 months to a year later it's out digitally and on DVD.
I think that's true because a lot of movies are really interesting to people, but like their interests only go so far. And as soon as a movie comes out, you want to take advantage of people's interest, and you'll get like people who, yeah, like the really niche movies that people want to see, but like aren't willing, because I think it also has to do with like how well known that franchise is. Like a lot of people will make time out of their schedules to see something that they recognize, like an Avengers movie or a Transformers, something like that. But like something that's really niche that you want to see, but maybe your friends don't want to see it because they never heard of it, or maybe like you're afraid, well, like no one's gonna know this movie, so am I gonna see this movie by myself, or who am I gonna talk about this movie with? Like people won't end up seeing that movie. But if it's available online, as soon as it comes out, then people can just like, oh well, it's here. I don't have to leave the house. It's very convenient.
And honestly, I mean, I kind of play up the character a little bit of like being that curmudgeon who like doesn't want to leave the house all the time. It's not always true, but I feel like honestly, probably 90% of the time I go to the movies, there's always that underlying thought I have, even if it's just for a minute, of like I probably would have enjoyed this more if I just stayed home and watched it there. The one exception that comes to mind, and it's a tired story for listeners, but the when I went to Infinity War with the late night team, that was such a moment because that theater was packed and everyone was reacting at the same time. And spoilers for Infinity War, but when Spider-Man dies towards the end, literally like McKenna, who was sitting on my left, was bawling. She was just crying. And Megan was sitting on my right laughing. Don't know why Megan was laughing. She's crazy. But every now and again, when you have a movie like that comes along, it is a magical moment when you're experiencing something with everyone around you, as opposed to you're just kind of stuck there with a bunch of people who are also stuck there. And I do believe in the potential of what theaters can be. I think there's something very special about that experience when it works. But I would argue that it falls flat far more often than you have that sort of magic to it. Well, Eric, we're a little bit over time here, but that's okay. We're sort of getting our sea legs back, doing the podcast regularly again. Is there any sort of feather in the cap or final thing you want to say just on this point? I don't think we really have any sort of a conclusion or a master statement.
The only thing I want to say is I want Alamo Drafthouse to come to Washington State.
Make it happen, Alamo Drafthouse. What are you afraid of? Come on, do it.
There's got to be a place available in Seattle that like would just kill, would just like get so much.
I honestly think if I were a betting man, I don't really have any knowledge about this, but I would guess, just because Alamo Drafthouse does seem like it's kind of a hipster thing, I think you'd probably see it in Portland before you'd see it in Seattle. One, because I think Portland kind of has that vibe to it, but also because I think Portland isn't as far north, and so it's a little closer to Alamo Drafthouse, areas they're already operating in. So I would be surprised if within the next 5 years or so we don't hear something about an Alamo Drafthouse happening in Portland. But so yeah, we'll see. The time will tell. But Yeah. Well, folks, let us know. What is your theater going experience? Do you have a ritual? Do you have the certain food or drink or candy that you buy and or smuggle in, depending on what you like? Let us know. We'd love to hear about it, and maybe some movies that you've seen as of late that you had either a really good or really bad experience about. We'd love to hear more about that as well. And remember, this has been the Not Yet Adults podcast, which comes to you every Friday now. We're doing one episode a week, so it's a little bit more manageable. But yeah, every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, all sorts of podcast services. We got a bunch of them. We're also on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Not Yet Adult, as well as on our own subreddit, r/Not Yet Adult, which you should check out if you have a second. If you have another second, you want to give us a little gift and brighten our days a little bit, head on over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review. Let us know. Let us know what your favorite movie is in the review. Let us know what your favorite episode of the podcast is. Whatever you're able to give us, obviously, it's completely free. It only takes a couple seconds of your time, but it helps us get discovered and it helps the podcast get a couple more eyeballs on it, which we would appreciate because we put a lot of work into it, and we're having a lot of fun doing this little show here. So we will be back next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time talking about something new, and we are very much looking forward to it. So thanks for listening, and until next time, this has been Not Yet Adults.
Bye-bye.